Welcome all. It is 4:01. To start the meeting, I just wanted to let everyone know that notice of live stream. We are now recording this meeting and it is being live streamed on YouTube for the public. And due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, committee members are each in their respective homes, places of work for the duration of this recording. And I would like to welcome all guests and viewers and thank you to those who have joined us today, and to the members of the public who are watching the live stream or later the recording of this meeting. We have a number of folks that are here. Josh Coley, Haley Ritchie, Samantha Kellerman from EY, our administrative support team, who've been doing a tremendous amount of work, are here with us. I believe our legal counsel, Bill Shores, is planning to attend. And we have our HR contractors, Brittany Rice and Karen Marner, who are also in attendance as well, as our committee members, consisting of Sam Muckoff-Swain, Vice Chair, our Chair of the Board, Councillor Wes Butthurst, and Councillor Michael Walters of the City of Edmonton. So that's who's with us today. And I want to welcome Paul Jankowski, our new CEO, who will be starting early next week, to the meeting as well. And we're great to see you and great to have you here. And I understand you have a bit of a video you wanted to share before we got into the meaty portion of our committee meeting today.
No video today, but thank you very much for the introduction.
No video.
No.
Okay. Sorry, when I said video, I just meant share his video on the meeting so we can see you, Paul.
When I take everything literally, video means we're going to have get popcorn and pop and everything. So
maybe a little later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, without any further ado, I think we'll move to the land acknowledgement. And on behalf of the HR and Compensation Committee, we would like to acknowledge the traditional land which we are virtually gathered is Treaty 6. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share the Edmonton metropolitan region as a home. And so with that, our agenda is in front of us. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Muckoff-Swain.
Yeah, I can move that the May 12th, 2021 agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. There are no changes or deletions, so all those in favor, please raise your hands. And it looks like the agenda is approved as presented. So the next item is the approval of the minutes from our inaugural board or our committee meeting of April the 14th. Are there any additions, changes, or deletions from those minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I can move those, Mr. Chair, that the April 14th, 2020 HR and Compensation Regular Committee meeting minutes be approved as presented.
Okay, any conversation, comments? If not, all those in favor? Looks like we have unanimous consent for approval of the minutes. So we have a number of things on the agenda today in our public portion, and we also have a brief in camera a little later. So I would turn it over to who will be making the presentation on these items. So will that be Josh?
Yeah, it will be. So I'll happily take that from here, Mr. Chair, and give you the board an update on some of the stand-up functions as our kind of first item of business. Much of this is carry-on information from what you would have heard or approved at the previous committee meeting or at the board, but just by way of updates, I want to highlight a few specific actions that have happened to progress, the stand-up of the organization. The first is our HR consultants who are here with us on the call have been helping us to build a compensation framework. We think that would really be helpful for our incoming CEO to have that at his disposal as he begins to build, the organization in the early stages. Of course, that means bringing on some of the kind of key people and positions to build that foundation of the organization. And so the exercise here really was one where market data was collected, comparables for member municipalities was gathered to ensure that positions, the more immediate ones and the ones that begin to be added, are in line and gives some framing and context for the CEO as he begins to make those kind of foundational hires. So that work is largely complete, and certainly the background on that will be part of what we're trying not to make too overwhelming, but will be provided for the CEO as he begins next week. So that work has begun there. And before I speak to the others, I'll just maybe pause to see if there are any questions on compensation framework for myself or Brittany or Karen. I guess my last comment maybe before any questions is we anticipate and expect that a lot of these things will be fine-tuned by the CEO, but we certainly want to make sure that he has the ability to kind of have this foundation in place to kind of really start moving as soon as he's in the chair. So I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll keep moving. So as you know, at the last committee meeting, we identified a preferred payroll system provider. So the system is now, the payroll provider has been adopted. And so that's in place, and we expect that will be in place in the coming weeks. So we're tracking well on this and expect that as that's put into place, again, that's something that will be there as the CEO is onboarded, but also as kind of some of those early hires or people begin to occupy roles, that the kind of the payroll foundation is there. And so I want to thank the committee for that at the last meeting, and with that kind of identification of that preferred vendor and now their selection, we have begun to implement the payroll system. So that's all tracking according to plan, and kind of closely tied to that is the work that's been done, or closely tied to both the comp framework and the payroll system is the work that's been done to kind of sketch out how the organization will evolve in the startup phase. And so that's something that we've developed and provided. Obviously, that will be given to the CEO as he comes in next week. But we wanted to have that in place so that we're ready to get moving. The one thing that is of note that we gave you kind of a heads up about, just because it's in the public domain, is that the first position, or I guess the second employee of the EMTSC, we would expect to be an executive assistant. And so that role is posted right now on the EMTSC website. And we're receiving a really good response to that. And so the process of beginning to, kind of vet and shortlist those have begun. And, similar processes will unfold under the guidance of the CEO in the coming days and weeks to start to build up the support network of the organization. So those are kind of the major highlights and some of the milestones around startup and just the kind of the functional pieces behind the organization. And we'd be happy to answer any questions on that item, Mr. Chair.
Any questions of members of the committee? Looks like not, so please proceed, Mr. Cole.
Great. So that was that information update. I guess I just procedurally, I don't know that we need a motion on that item as an agenda item. Maybe we don't. So I'll keep going then if that was just for information purposes. So part of the critical starting point of a new organization, then the people that will make up the organization are a number of policies that will guide kind of the expectations and lay out the expectations of how people who work for the EMTSC will conduct themselves. And so what we have now as this agenda item are 4 kind of critical foundational policies that we want to walk through. Now, in many cases, I know you all received the full policies in advance in your agenda package, so you've seen those. So we can happily walk you through each of these as we've got laid out on the slide, and maybe do it that way, and then entertain any questions. And if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair, we can keep proceeding through it that way, unless people have any kind of burning questions they want to get to right away.
I leave it to the committee if you have any questions at this point, or do you just want to cover them as we go through the policies? I'm seeing general concurrence in that regard, Josh, so take it away.
Perfect. So we'll start with an employee code of conduct. So this again is there are some key policies that we want in place. And in fact, by kind of just for illustrative purposes, even your incoming CEO, likely on his first day, will be kind of putting his signature to paper with all of these policies, and we expect that all new employees would be doing the same. And so really good practice to start at the beginning. The first of those is the employee code of conduct, and really something you've seen in other organizations. There's nothing I would say out of the norm or exceptional in this one, but good practice to start for any organization, especially a new one, and really just outlines the expectations around the professionalism, employee conduct, conducting business, the way they protect or guard company information, things like that we'd want to make sure there's everyone who would be added into this organization is clear about. So again, I think the message on this one is, while some of this seems obvious and we would expect this would be the conduct of anyone joining, the principle here is to be very clear and upfront about that, and to have it as kind of one of the first things people see joining the organization. And so the full policy is in front of you, but happy to answer any questions of what you've read or just what's on this slide.
Josh, just a general question. With all of the policies you're developing, there's a good body of work that already exists, so we're not starting from scratch, I would take it, in relation to the development of the things that ultimately end up in the final document?
Exactly. This would be very much in line with leading practices, and not only leading practices limited to this geography or to this type of industry, but ones that extend beyond, that you'd see both in public and private sector. But we certainly did, as we have for many policies, kind of a general practice now has become to kind of canvass and collect everything that's being done at the member municipalities, and to make sure that any of the policies we bring forward and that you approve are in line with those. We don't want it to be an outlier. And in many cases, I would suggest that taking kind of the best from all of those policies to bring those together and to put in front of you.
So we're maintaining a consistency from the board code of conduct straight down to everyone that works for the organization to be held to the highest professional standard.
Yeah, that's a really good point I should have mentioned. Obviously, in previous meetings, there was a board code of conduct approved. The employee code of conduct is definitely in line with that. There are obviously some circumstances and situations that are very unique to board members that are highlighted in that policy. But yeah, they very much are companion policies that would, kind of indicate the type of conduct to be expected from the chair of the board right down to every other employee.
So I guess the one question that I've got, other than the last comments, this would become a basic onboarding policy for new employees. As our new CEO brings people into the organization, they're onboarded with the context of this kind of a policy and requirements, and ultimately sign off. Is that what the general intent is? Okay.
Correct. So to be made aware, the sign off is basically them declaring that they've been made aware of these policies and have reviewed them. And so our first instance of that will be on the 17th, as Mr. Jankowski, signs off on a series of these, and then the expectation is that the practice after that would be anyone else who joins does the same. I see a couple of their hands up, but maybe I'll just add one last thought to that. We also anticipate, as is the case with every organization, as the organization grows and changes, so too will these policies. So they're not intended to be static documents that you kind of never have to touch again. And in many cases, there's provisions put in place where there would be a prescribed review, but certainly. The first kind of point of review is an incoming CEO, and so there might even be a reflection there at that point. But then the expectation is that as the organization grows, as these are tested in real terms, and hopefully they don't need to be, that they would also evolve.
I see Councillor Muckhoff-Swain has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The question was more less around the policy of it, and you kind of touched on that. As new employees come on board, I was just curious, if it best practice that, make it a requirement for employees to do this on an annual basis and kind of re-up this type of policy. I'm just curious, not that far, or we're not quite there yet. The second question is, this is just, it can just be a pretty stale document, right? And is there an interactive way that we've considered kind of, as opposed to just skipping out and kind of signing off on that? And it might be too early on that, but just curious in terms of making sure that we keep this front and center, because obviously this is what governs everything we do. So just those couple of questions there.
Yeah, and thanks for those. Maybe in reverse order. In terms of not making it just a page that people lose in their files, especially as we live in this remote world. I think that's a good point, and one that we'll take back to kind of consider how this is a little more dynamic and maybe present in kind of people's working days. So that's certainly a good point that we will give some thought to. In terms of the review on an annual basis, I'll ask maybe Brittany or Karen to kind of comment on whether they've seen that or not, and whether they have or not. I think that's a really good, kind of consideration for the CEO, that might become a real meaningful way to make these not just kind of dust collectors and get people to kind of re-up, so to speak.
Thank you, Josh. I'm sorry, Sam, your internet was cutting in and out, or my internet was cutting in and out. I only heard part of the first question. If you wouldn't mind sharing the question again, the annual basis piece. Is it just having the policies reviewed on an annual basis?
Yeah, and apologies for the internet. I'm streaming from my home into my laptop here. So hopefully this is a little bit better. Maybe I'll go off video to reduce the bandwidth. But yeah, the question was, I think, again, a decision for the CEO, but, is this something that we could look at re-upping and doing on an annual basis to make sure that's fresh in mind and people on an annual basis recommitting to the code of conduct? I'm assuming you've seen that in other organizations, but I think that's the question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, this would be reviewed on an annual basis to ensure that the policy is up to date, as well as reviewed on an annual basis with employees and signed on an annual basis with employees to keep it top of mind.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, Brittany?
I think Karen covered it. All good from me.
Okay, if that answered your question, Councillor Muckhoff-Swain, I see Councillor Budhead has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to follow on to Councillor Monkoff-Swain's question. I certainly support what's written in the policy around the annual sign-off. I was just wondering how you envisioned that to actually play out in practice. Annual performance appraisal time, or how does that play? Because it's one thing to have an organization of 5 or 10 or even 20. It's another to have an organization of 2,000. So
yeah, and I think that's
a process.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why Councillor Monkoff-Swain's second kind of question and comment becomes really relevant, because as the organization grows in numbers, there's going to have to be a more dynamic, kind of user-friendly, for lack of a better description, way of employees being able to kind of agree again. And certainly, speaking from experience, you know, at our firm, that's done kind of digitally quite effortlessly, and you're reminded relentlessly to do so. And if you don't, you know, there's eventually kind of you get that call that you don't want to get, or there, you know, even repercussions. So I think that would be kind of embedded into a process by which people would get that that reminder. I think the one thing that's worth noting is that, and I think you'd know this well, Councillor Broadhead, is at some point, though, there will be a number of workers and employees that may be in kind of remote or kind of on the front lines in terms of their workplaces. And so probably it'll have to be a mix of methods by which people sign this. If you're not in front of a computer, but you're, you know, operating a bus or doing maintenance or whatever it might be, there may have to be an opportunity for something to be app-based or even paper-based too. So I think it will have to be a combination of those things.
Yeah,
going forward. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I appreciate the thought, and to Sam's point, I mean, this needs to be front and center all the time. Otherwise it gets lost. So, thanks.
Okay, any other questions, Josh? Or any other observations on the policy?
No, I think we're good from our end. If there aren't questions, we'll happily move on to the next one, which is kind of some of the questions and comments segue into. So again, this is a companion policy around respect in the workplace, and really it speaks to ensuring that you know, just regardless of what your work environment is in an organization like this, that you can work in one that is safe, respectful, and inclusive, and ensuring that the principles of a respectful workplace are communicated quite clearly to employees. And so again, I don't think there's a lot that needs to be you know, kind of detailed, but it certainly does speak to the type of organization that you want to build. And I think by way of adopting this policy at the board level, which it eventually will be, by having employees sign it, it really does kind of signal that that you really want to build a positive, inclusive, and safe workplace that's free of any forms of harassment, obviously anything even more extreme like violence or bullying. And so that's the intent of this policy.
Any comments, questions of the board? Wes, is your hand still up from before?
Oh, a lazy hand, sorry.
It was a good hand. Anyways, okay, if not, no questions, I guess we can proceed on to the next policy.
Sure. This policy is, again, a really important one to have. Again, when Councillor Harris asked the question about kind of how this aligns with kind of the board, some of the board policies, this one is very specific to conflicts of interest and conflict of interest for employees. So this, you know, as best as possible and as thorough way as possible, sets out to describe the standards of behavior expected of employees in some of the professional conduct categories. And so it tries to, in advance, outline kind of situations that you would want to avoid. And I think the important note here is that it endeavors to speak to, of workforce conflicts, but even perceived conflicts, because those can often be as damaging for an organization. And I think this is important for any organization at any time, but certainly one that is establishing its identity and establishing a level of trust with kind of stakeholders in the public and the region. It's really important to have this in place right off the hop. And so the intention here is just to, again, signal this to employees, signal this to your partners, but also have this in place as people join the organization, and outline what those conflicts would be, how they're intended and should be acting, and how they can seek help to avoid the conflicts or even stay out of situations where there's a perceived conflict.
Okay, I don't have any questions. Any questions of the board with respect to conflict of interest? If not, please proceed.
And then finally, kind of the fourth maybe leg of this table is the diversity and inclusion policies. And again, I think it complements what we've just discussed before, but really we want to give kind of the clear indication and signal that the organization is committed to protecting diversity and inclusion and welcoming people to the workplace. And so it outlines in the Commission's commitment to that. And so again, it speaks to the need, which again, I know is the intention of this board, to have an inclusive workplace that will attract the talent you want, that will retain the talent you want, and that will make it a place that kind of everyone and anyone would feel safe working. And so why this is needed, I think if anything, we're looking at something that's pretty close to a regulatory requirement, and if not, it likely will be soon. But more important than that, I think it does demonstrate that the organization's committed to building an inclusive workspace that welcomes anyone, irrespective of their backgrounds or their perspectives and experiences. And so this is the intent of this policy.
That's great. I guess we can see what's going on in a number of workplaces across the nation. And these core policies are going to be really critical to standing up the organization, as you mentioned earlier, Josh. So are there any questions relative to diversity and inclusion? Pretty fundamental policy statement to have. So I think all of the work that's been done thus far, these obviously from the context of our committee meeting, there's more depth to these policies, but these are generally the covering context of the policies. See, Councillor Walters, your hand is up. Questions?
Thank you. So maybe, I guess my question is, once the staff is fully, Paul's role in there, and the staff is built, the procedures and the practices around hiring will be developed by them in terms of, so if we wanted to use like a name blind strategy in terms of hiring.
Yeah.
We just set the policy.
Yeah.
They'll develop procedures at the staff level, at the management level, right?
Yeah, and so those procedures really critical to give kind of teeth or to these policies, or else they might just be kind of nice things said on paper. And so the expectation is that these are board approved policies that guide that and give the direction, so that then management starts to create those actual procedures to make sure that that they're kind of being lived through the organization. And that's a really good example you just gave, Councillor Walters, is some practices like that you would implement to ensure that the policies are being supported by your procedures and practices.
Thank you.
Any other observations, questions on the policies that we've seen thus far? If not, I guess, would you be looking for a motion to adopt the policies that we've just covered in general?
Yeah, we definitely want the motion, and just as you noted, Chair, these are all the full policies are in your agenda packages. All of this, these slides that we've gone through today, plus the full policies, will also be moving on to the board, so that the other members will then also vote on this. But yeah, we're looking for a motion to endorse and recommend that these move to the board.
I'd be looking for a mover to move this motion. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the HR and Compensation Committee endorse and recommend the presented critical policies to the board for approval.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I would call the question. All those in favor? And carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Great work, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're moving in the right direction, and that's great to see. And I think it's going to give our new CEO a little peace of mind as he walks in the door next Monday.
Well, credit to Brittany Bryce and Karen Marner for all their good work, and of course Haley and Samantha and team for bringing them here. But I think, yeah, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, really good footing to start on.
Okay, if there's nothing more in that regard, I think we need to move into in camera. There's a motion before you. Would somebody please to move in camera?
I can move that the board move in camera in accordance with the provisions of Division 2, exceptions to disclosure of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, FOIP, and the sections mentioned there.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Carried unanimously. So we will be moving in camera. Will we be, who will be moving in camera with us in that regard, Mr. Cole?
I might use a lifeline on this one, and
This is getting to be old hat already, this moving in and out of breakout rooms.
Excellent. Looks like we're all back.
As long as we don't lose somebody in the ether and they never come back and we never see them again. Stuck in, you know what, that could be an interesting sci-fi movie theme. So, okay, so looking for a motion, Councillor Walter, did you want to put the motion on the table?
I would love to. I'll move that the committee accept the material and discussion as presented in camera as information.
If there's no comments, questions, or otherwise, please vote. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So with that in mind, I guess our next order of business is to adjourn the meeting, and then we'll be all getting together next week for our board meeting. Is that correct?
that is correct. That is your last order of business.
Okay, if that's the case, then I will adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you all next week.
See you
Thank you
guys.
very much.
Thanks, everyone.
With a minute to spare, Mr. Chair. Well done.
Oh, no, it's a staff